Do the rich really have enough money to pay one half of American workers to kill the other half? At one point in time, they thought they did, and I think, frankly, we're back there again. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Thom Hartmann here with you. Wanted to go through some, just to add to my rant, as it were, some of the news of the day. And then at the bottom of the hour, I'll start picking up your phone calls here. Jay Gould, the railroad baron, this was back in the 1880s. Jay Gould was there was this little group of 4 or 5 guys who basically owned all the major railroads in the United States. They were referred to as robber barons back in the day. Not just them. I mean, that was we call them billionaires today. Which, by the way, as a little side note here, Louise and I have been watching Billions. I'm gonna make a list one of these days of the shows that we have been binge watching, and because every night, after we have dinner and after Rachel Maddow's show's over, we watch one show and then go to sleep, because we go to sleep early. But it's like a palate cleanser, it kind of takes your mind off the day. And, the new Blacklist was just out, and with a little bit of animation. I mean, it was fascinating to see the crew. And the new Killing Eve is out tonight, and there's some good shows out. So one of these days we'll have a show about shows, right? But in any case, Jay Gould and the robber baron, and as I was saying, Billions. That reminded me of Billions. The last episode of Billions was up last night, and I'm convinced that show is nothing but a show about sociopaths, about psychopaths. The lead character is a psychopath. His opponent is a psychopath. His opponent's wife is a psychopath. He's training his kids to be a psychopath. It's really fascinating how and which leads me to this whole theory that maybe psychopathy is the principal characteristic of what you could broadly call European culture that has spread around the world, colonized most of the world, and might be the secret power that has been used to conquer the world and bring us to this brink of destruction, literally. But that's a whole nother conversation for another time. Jay Gould, which is where I started this rant, the robber baron back in the 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s. Jay Gould was one of the guys who bribed Stephen J. Field, the Supreme Court justice, when he was in the California circuit, bribed him to get the California tax cases before the Supreme Court that Field also served on, so that they could get corporate personhood in 1886 in Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. So that's who Jay Gould was. Jay Gould once famously said that he was so rich, he and his buddies, that they could pay half of America's working people to kill the other half of America's working people. This was their strategy to break the unions. This was their strategy to stop any kind of rise of worker power. And look around you. This is what Trump and Fox News are doing. And we'll be talking about this with Jen Senko in the third hour of the program in more detail. But this is clearly happening. I mentioned the bailout for the rich. Over at ProPublica, Jesse Eisenberg doing some really good investigative reporting, or at least reporting on it. ProPublica, 10 weeks into the worst crisis in 90 years, they say. We've got, actually, I think we're 11 weeks now. This was published last week. We've got 25 million people officially unemployed, more or less. But the S&P right now is up 30% from its lows in March, which is a huge profit opportunity. Somebody puts $1 billion in, and now they got $1.3 billion. I mean, it is just amazing, right? Up 30%. And companies have sold record amounts of debt, particularly junk bonds, over this period of time, as I mentioned, because Jay Powell and the Fed are buying them. The Fed has $6 trillion worth of corporate assets on its balance sheets right now. That's more than Congress has appropriated. It's just a mind-boggling amount of money. And asset holders like Apollo and Blackstone, they're being insured now by the Fed. J.P. Morgan economist wrote in a celebratory note on Friday, quote, "The Fed has explicitly indicated that there is no dollar limit and no danger of running out of ammunition." So off we go to the races, right? Meanwhile, you have 2 House panels. Joaquin Castro, who's the chair of the Foreign Affairs Subcommittee, which oversees the State Department, and John Larson, who's the chair of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Social Security, which oversees the Social Security Administration, both saying to Mike Pompeo, tell us about this Eagle plan, where every American who has a Social Security account, which is basically every American who's ever had a job, or it's basically every American, that you can get $10,000 right now to get you through this crisis so you don't starve or become homeless. And in exchange for that, we're going to cut your Social Security when you retire. The idea was sent to a guy named Keith Krach. Keith Krach is who works in the State Department with Mike Pompeo. He's good buddies with Jared Kushner. In fact, they traveled together on the presidential delegation to Davos, Switzerland in January for that World Economic Forum. And the guy who works for Keith Krach, who actually wrote the plan, his name is Paul Tuow, Tuow. And he's the chief strategy officer for Krach. Krach is kind of the chief strategy officer for Kushner, and Kushner tells Trump what to do every day. So expect to hear more about the Eagle plan, this brilliant program by the State Department to shovel a whole pile of money over to working people by taking it out of their Social Security. Coming to a news story near you soon. This is what's coming. Meanwhile, Florida man who is infected with the coronavirus has issued a warning to his buddies. He says, many people still think the coronavirus is a fake crisis, which at one time I did too. And not that I thought it wasn't a real virus, but I thought it was blown out of proportion. It wasn't that serious. Well, he just recovered. He has not yet fully recovered, but he's out of the ICU. His wife has been sedated and put on a ventilator. He says, after 3 weeks, I've come to accept that my wife may pass away. And the peace I have is about that is that I know without a shadow of a doubt that she would be going home to the Lord. He said, looking back, I should have worn a mask, but I didn't. He trusted Donald Trump.